Hey everyone, it's good to be back with you. I'm sitting here in the gear closet just for old time's sake. And today's vlog is only going to be, this week's vlog is only going to be as good as each of us make it. Because it's the answer to one question. In the last 6 months, what has God so undeniably done that you had to share it with someone else? In simpler terms, how has God shown up in the last 6 months? It's so easy in times like this to look at all the negative, the gaps, the lacks, and the things that are missing. And instead, as Christians, we're invited to be the ones who are pointing at all the good. In fact, this is who we want to be as people at Canyon Ridge, especially as followers of Jesus. We want to celebrate every good thing. Point at, call out, lift up, speak about, and share every good thing that's going on in our lives. And so listen, the whole point of today is to invite you to answer that simple question from before. In the last 6 months, how has God so undeniably shown up in your life that you had to tell someone about it? Would you take a minute and just tell every single one of us about it? Some abbreviated version of the story. Change the names if you have to. Write a book if you have to. But right now, jump into the comments and let's spur one another on with stories. I know, like I said, it's easy to see the lack, but there are good places to look for what God's up to. Let me give you 3 real quick. Number 1, where has God's presence been experienced and felt by you in a tangible way? A few weeks ago, I told you about this rock that I picked up at a hike in Yosemite. And I could talk for hours about how God showed up. I could even talk about 4 days later when I was kind of holding this rock, praying with a friend, going through a very hard week, tons of challenge about it, and how God in that moment showed up and said, Drew, I gave you this rock long before you needed it. Just as a reminder of his presence and showing up with him. So where has God shown up? Where have you sensed his presence? That's one place to look. Presence, number 1. Number 2, what practice have you begun or developed or deepened over the course of the last several months that has created space for God? I've returned again to one of my very favorite devotional resources called the Disciplines for the Inner Life. And I just love the way God speaks to me in the midst of this, the conversations that are started, the things, the thoughts that are inspired by some of the authors that are in here. It's a morning practice that has become extremely important to me. What practice is creating space for God to show up for you? Maybe that's a place to look for a story that you could put in the comments or share with your family and friends right now. Or finally, I've already even alluded to this. What about people? How has God placed people in your life? And God has shown up in the form of his people in really impactful, meaningful ways that were undeniably God's provision. I could tell you long stories about some friends, but honestly, there's just too many. I hope there's a lot for you as well. To share one quickly, I was on the phone today with a friend named Sandy, and her story was about how her life group, the people that she gathers with, have been so critically important. And some of the most meaningful things God has done in deepening their relationships and showing up and bringing strength when there could be fear. And so it was such a cool conversation. We'll have to have her on sometime to talk just a little bit about it, but it's a place for you to look. 3 quick places to look. But all of us, we have these stories. Let's get our focus away from what we are lacking, what we're missing, or any of those other things. And instead, let's recite, rehearse, retell over and over with one another, beginning in the comments for one another. To spur one another on that God's at work. God's on the move. He's not stopped by any of this. He's showing up over and over and over. When we stop looking at gaps and looking at the places where he shows up in his presence, in practices that create space, and in the people he's placed in our lives, there are so many good stories to tell. And we, above all, should be celebrators of how awesome and generous our God is. So let's do it. Get to it. Jump right in the comments, share a story, and then step right out and share it with a family, friend, text 10 friends. But let's be constant speakers about how great God is.